A strategic concession. Strategic concession on the evening of 27 February 1860 in the Great Hall of the Cooper Union for the advancement of science and art in Manhattan, an unknown lawyer from Illinois delivered the speech that made him a serious candidate for the Republican nomination for the presidency of the United States. The lawyer's name was Abraham Lincoln. He had not been the audience's first choice. He had not been the organizer's first choice. The audience had come to hear a man named William Seward, the senator from New York, who was the presumptive frontrunner. Lincoln had been substituted in late and had spent 2 months preparing. The speech he had prepared was approximately 7,000 words long. It was about slavery in the territories. It would change his political career. What is striking about the Cooper Union speech, on rereading, is the architecture of its concessions. Lincoln does not begin by attacking the South. He begins by addressing the South directly. He does this in the most respectful possible terms. He says he wishes to consider the question that divides the country as fellow citizens. He spends the first quarter of the speech examining, in detail, what the founders themselves believed about the federal government's authority over slavery in the territories. He goes through the votes of each of the 39 signers of the Constitution. He notes which ones voted on slavery measures and how. He concedes everything he can concede. The founders did not think slavery should be abolished by federal power in the slave states. The founders did not think the federal government should interfere with the domestic institutions of any state. The founders on these points are with the South. Lincoln gives this concession its full weight. He does not undermine it as he is making it. He does not signal, with tone or qualifying phrase, that he is making the concession only to set up a counter-strike. He makes the concession the way an honest man makes a concession. On these points, you are correct, and I will say so plainly, and I will say so for as long as it takes for the point to register. Only after the long concession, after the audience can see that he has conceded what he could honestly concede, and conceded it without flinching, does he turn. The point on which the founders are not with the South, Lincoln then shows, is the question of slavery in the territories. The founders did regulate slavery in the territories. They voted, repeatedly and across the years, to restrict it. They did not believe federal authority over the territories was the same as federal authority over the states. They drew a distinction. The Republican Party of 1860 is drawing the same distinction. Republican position on the territories is, on the historical record, the founders' position. The Southern position, that any federal restriction on slavery in the territories is a violation of constitutional principles, is the novel position, not the traditional one. The argument is now in motion. The South cannot retreat to the founders supported us. Lincoln has just spent 20 minutes acknowledging where the founders did support them, and he has done it more thoroughly than the South's own apologists. The South can no longer accuse him of misrepresenting the historical record. He has stipulated to the parts of the record that favor them. He has earned, by stipulation, the right to be heard on the parts that do not. The speech, from that point, is irresistible. The moral conclusion arrives with a kind of inevitability, because the audience has watched Lincoln decline to make it for a long time, and is therefore disposed to grant it when it finally comes. Cooper Union is the textbook of strategic concession. It is the move that completes the offensive arsenal. The principle is this: concede what you can honestly concede, fully and without reservation, and you will be heard on what you cannot concede with a credibility no other move can buy. Strategic concession is, in the architecture of verbal combat, the supreme costly signal. We discussed costly signals. The principle was that signals of credibility have force in proportion to what they would cost the sender if the underlying claim were false. Strategic concession satisfies the costly signal condition more thoroughly than almost any other move available. To concede a point is to forgo the rhetorical advantages that point would have given you. The audience, watching the concession, understands that the speaker has chosen accuracy over advantage. The speaker, having visibly chosen accuracy in the small case, is more likely to be choosing accuracy in the large case. Credibility transfers. This is not psychology. It is Bayesian inference on the audience's part, executed at speed. They do not articulate it as Bayesian inference. They experience it as trust. But the underlying calculation is the same. The speaker's behavior in the conceded case raises the probability that the speaker's behavior in the contested case is also accurate. The audience updates accordingly. Strategic concession also disorients the opponent. Most opponents in serious debate are operating with a model of you as someone trying to win every point available. They expect you to defend, deflect, and counterattack on every move. When you concede, you behave outside their model. They lose footing. The arguments they had prepared depended on you contesting. Now that you have conceded, those arguments are pointing at empty air. They must reorganize on the fly. While they are reorganizing, they are not advancing. And strategic concession changes what the audience thinks the contest is about. As long as you are contesting every point, the audience perceives the situation as a fight over scraps. When you concede, you signal to the audience that you understand which points are scraps and which points are stakes. The audience is grateful. They are tired of fights over scraps. They are looking for someone serious. The speaker who concedes the scraps and reserves their fight for the stakes is taken by the audience to be the more serious party. The move has, of course, a danger. To concede what you should not have conceded is to give away substance. We will return to the diagnostic in a moment. First, the move at its highest form. In approximately the year 800, in the town of Mahishi, in what is now the state of Bihar, Shankara walked into the courtyard of the most distinguished scholar of the Mimamsa school of Indian philosophy, Mandana Misra, and proposed a debate. The Mimamsa, as a school, was committed to the religious ritual structure that organized the daily life of orthodox Brahmin households. The school held that liberation moksha was attainable through the meticulous performance of the Vedic rituals. Marriage, householder life, ritual fire tending, the prescribed sequence of ceremonies, all of this was the path. Renunciation was not necessary. The householder was the central figure. Shankara was a renunciate. His position was almost the opposite. He held that moksha was attainable through the recognition of one's identity with Brahman, and that ritual action, however elaborate, was not the proximate cause of liberation. The two positions could not both be the central truth. Shankara opened the debate with a strategic concession of remarkable scope. He conceded the Mimamsa system in full. He conceded that the rituals were efficacious for the ends they were prescribed for. He conceded that they were necessary preparation for serious philosophical investigation. He conceded that the householder's life, properly conducted, was the appropriate stage for the great majority of human beings, and that renunciation was suitable only for those whose preparatory work had been completed. He conceded that the Vedas were authoritative on the matters they addressed. He conceded that Mandana's textual learning in the Mimamsa was deeper than his own, and that he was not in a position to teach Mandana the Mimamsa. He conceded all of this, and he conceded it before he had said a word about his own position. The structural effect was the same as Lincoln's at Cooper Union. Shankara had stipulated to the parts of Mimamsa that he could honestly stipulate to. He had taken off the table any accusation that he was a sectarian renunciate hostile to ritual life. He had earned, by stipulation, the credibility he would need to make the much more limited claim that was actually the matter at issue. The matter at issue was a single proposition. Moksha is not the result of action. Action, by definition, has a beginning and an end in time. Moksha, by definition, is nitya, eternal, without beginning, without end. What has a beginning and an end cannot produce what has neither. Therefore, ritual action, however efficacious for other ends, cannot produce Moksha, the Mimamsa, is correct about almost everything. It is incorrect about precisely this one thing. Mandana, having watched Shankara concede the system at length, could not respond by accusing him of misunderstanding the Mimamsa. The concessions had preempted that move. Mandana had to engage on the narrow question, and on the narrow question, Shankara's argument was very strong. The debate ran, by the traditional accounts, for many days. We will follow it in detail in Fight Breakdown 2. The opening, however, is what concerns us here. The opening was the supreme strategic concession of the dialectical tradition. It made the rest of the debate winnable. Without it, the rest of the debate would have been a sectarian quarrel over which Brahmin school had it right. With it, the debate became what Shankara wanted it to be, a focused investigation of one technical proposition, which one of them had right and the other did not. This is strategic concession applied at the opening of a long engagement. It is also a move Shankara made at a different scale, much later in his career, on a road in the city of Varanasi, with consequences that we will treat in detail in Fight Breakdown 3. The road encounter is, in some ways, the deepest single instance of the move in the historical record. It involves Shankara conceding everything, including his own social and ritual standing, to an opponent who, by the categories of the time, should not have been an opponent at all. The concession produced the Manisha Panchakam, the verses we have already cited as the ethical anchor of this entire book. We will get to the road. The point here is that the move, at its highest scale, is one of the few moves powerful enough to reshape not only an argument, but a tradition. The man who made the moves we are studying made them at every scale, and the largest moves were the largest concessions. The contemporary instance most worth knowing, for its scale and its sustained execution, is the work of Daryl Davis. Davis is a black blues musician, born in 1958. He has been, over the course of the past 40 years, a one-man demonstration of the principle that strategic concession is among the most powerful moves available in the most adverse circumstances. He has spent those years cultivating relationships with members of the Ku Klux Klan. He has approached them as a person, not as an adversary. He has conceded the parts of their experience. He could honestly concede that they had grievances, that some of those grievances had causes, that they had been spoken about by other people in ways that reduced them to the category of the clan rather than to individual human beings, that the reduction was something they were tired of. He did not concede the substance of their racial doctrine. He did not concede that the clan was a defensible organization. He did not pretend agreement where he had none. The concessions were narrow and accurate. The disagreements remained, but Davis sat with them. He listened. He let himself be known to them. Over years, for some of his interlocutors, decades, they came to know him as a person whose existence was a counterexample to the doctrine they had been holding. The doctrine had said that black people were of a certain character. The character of Daryl Davis was not the character the doctrine described. The cognitive dissonance, sustained over time, came down on the doctrine's side rather than on Davis's. By his own count, several dozen Klansmen have, at various points, handed Davis their robes. They did not hand them over because they had been refuted. They handed them over because the structure that had held the doctrine in place, the absence of a person who falsified it, had been removed. Davis's work is a sustained study in the largest application of the move we are considering. He conceded what he could concede. He spent years on the concessions. He did not strike at the center until the center was already loose. He did not, in many cases, strike at the center at all. The center fell on its own when the conditions that had supported it were no longer supporting it. Most of us will not, in our lives, have the patience or the courage for what Davis has done. We will, however, have the opportunity to make smaller versions of the same move on smaller stages. The structure is the same. A note on what strategic concession is not. Strategic concession is not flattery. It is not the move where you praise the opponent's character, or their tone, or their reasonableness. in lieu of conceding any substantive point. The audience can tell the difference. Flattery is performed for its effect on the audience. Concession is performed because it is true. The audience hears the difference even when they cannot articulate it. Strategic concession is not surrender. Conceding what is true does not commit you to conceding what is false. The two are precisely separable. The opponent who attempts to extend your concession beyond what you actually conceded is committing a different fallacy, the suppressed condition fallacy, and the audience will help you call it out, because they too watched what you conceded and what you did not. Strategic concession is not weakness. It is, in the inverse, the move available only to those whose position is robust enough to survive the conceding. The participant whose position cannot survive any concession at all is in a weak position. They are clinging to every detail because the structure cannot afford the loss of any. The participant whose position is robust can afford to concede the inessential. The very capacity to concede is, to the audience, a signal of robustness. When you see what looks like strategic concession, but which functions as flattery, surrender, or trembling reluctance to disagree, you are not seeing the move. The move requires honest concession on the points where concession is honest, and full force on the points where it is not. The two are inseparable. To execute one without the other is to fall into a different posture entirely, and a worse one.